Today's episode of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast is brought to you by King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry, Bavarian Grill, and Ye Olde Butcher Shop. King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry, a longtime retail and repair shop for, you guessed it, clocks and jewelry. Everything from grandfather clocks to mantle clocks, wall clocks. Hey, if you just need to get the battery in your watch replaced, King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry has you covered. Not only that, they are also a gold and silver exchange. So if you have any gold coins, silver coins that you're looking to trade in for cash on the spot, King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry has you covered there as well. They are located at 1201 North Central Expressway, having served Plano for over 30 years. King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry. And now, let's podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch. I'm the sports editor with Star Local Media, and I am being joined by Kendrick Johnson, who's the sports editor for the McKinney Courier-Gazette, as well as Taylor Ragland, who's the sports reporter for the Plano Star-Courier, Allen American, and Lake City Sun. Hope everybody had a fun Memorial Day, an extended weekend, and we are here to keep talking some spring football. We're going to continue our spring football primer series that we began last week. As was the case, the first podcast was devoted to Class 6A, second one 5A, so we're going to keep that same formula going for this week as we round things out with two more catch-ups. We're going to check it on two more districts in Class 6A, starting with District 9-6A, which for a lot of these schools, used to be called 6-6A, but we've shifted Allen, Plano ISD, McKinney ISD over a bit further east into Region 2, and some similarities, from what they've seen these last couple years in 6-6A, but a couple new teams, Jesuit and Prosper. So for the sake of brevity, though, we've only got so much time, so we're since we cover 7 of these 8 teams directly, we're just going to kind of go around the horn and just focus on one key offseason storyline for all 7 of these of the schools that are at least in our markets. We can start, Kendrick, with you. You've been kind of out and about. You saw, McKinney ISD had all of their spring games all last week. Same day.
I was at Poe, Boyd, and North. Spent like 30 minutes at each school.
Wow. So McKinney HS got the stadium, whereas the others had to practice at their high schools. Yeah. All right, show some love to the old
don't say
faithful.
That. Shout out to my Mr. Bobby, the principal, the original. That's right. So I guess if we're gonna kind of just play some catch up now on just kind of where McKinney and McKinney Boyd are at in their respective off seasons. This McKinney team was certainly one of the better stories these last couple years in 6-6A, but a team that a lot's changed since we parted. Everything changed. New coaches, new stars. They have 2 key players to build around. They have Cortrick Dunn, who ran for 340, subbing in for the one game that Matt Gaddett sat out last year, and they have Andrew Pitts, who was a part of our Faces of the Program series. He had 7 interceptions, ran 3 of them for touchdowns, and he got a reputation as being one of the most locked down corners in 6-6A last year. It's a hard district.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And another thing that people don't understand about him, not only can he cover, he can tackle. As a whole, McKinney is going to be, nobody knows what to expect out of them. They're going to be a very competitive team, but at the end of the day, it's all about repetition and getting experience and how people experience. So nobody knows, which might be a good thing, because nobody knows how Coach Shaver's offense is going to transfer from 4A to 6A. So they're definitely the wild card of the whole district. Where on the other hand, Boyd, I'd be very surprised if Boyd does not fit us in the top 2 or 3 in the district. They should end their playoff drought next year. They got the experience, they got the depth, but they've had problems staying healthy, which has been key. Christian Ziegler got banged up. They lost like 3 or 4 defensive starters last year. Like by district, they were like playing a mash unit. You can only cover the hole so much. But the main thing about them is they're motivated. That they take that streak very personally, and I won't say they own the McKinney under the Plano schools, but they do very well against the Plano schools.
Oh yeah, no, they traditionally have. I know, at least having covered Plano Senior specifically over the years, there was a stretch there where it just felt like Boyd had their number. I think this past season actually might have been the first time.
And Boyd should have won that game too.
Yeah, it was a defensive grinder, that one. You did mention Boyd and just some bad luck health-wise, and that's a nice way to transition over to Plano East, a team that caught plenty of bad breaks health-wise last season, a team that looked like a team that, like you said about Boyd, had the ability to finish, in the top 2 or 3 in the district, and then just the running game, which is kind of supposed to be the identity of their offense, just could not catch a break health-wise. So Panthers missed the playoffs. They will look to reignite that fire this coming fall. Taylor, you were out at their spring showcase recently. So just kind of what's the vibe on the Panthers, and what is one key offseason storyline?
I think the interesting thing offensively is that last year, with the injury to the backfield and the running backs and all that good stuff, their passing game really matured. I think maybe earlier than it should have, and that shouldn't go away. They have Brandon Mallory back at quarterback and Jalen Anderson back out wide, and those two guys are really dynamic and could really have a pretty explosive partnership, I guess, throwing the football. So offensively, I think East will be okay. I think defense is really the side of the ball that they have to focus on. And when
you can attest to that, Kendrick.
Yeah.
$5.99 in person.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is about $5.99 that people don't understand is it was a result of the talent of Matt Gaddick, first of all, but they kept scoring, so they had to keep them in.
Right.
People think like, oh, McKinney just ran them to death. They had to keep them in. It was like the perfect storm for that whole thing. And then they were going to run the clock out, and somebody got a personal foul. They took his cheeks out on Gaddick, and then it's like, I'm like, we're going to try to go get this record, and then they went and got it. So it had like the calm before the storm, but the common denominator was the defensive line was terrible.
And I talked to head coach Joe McCullough when I was out at the spring game, and he said personally he's invested a lot this spring in the defensive side of the ball. He's worked with the linebackers personally, he's worked with defensive backs personally, and he's got pretty much his entire coaching staff really kind of keying in on how to make the defense better and taking a lot of pride in that. And I think Zach Wachuku is a really good leader in their defensive backfield. He'll be a senior. He was elected one of their captains, the first group of captains since McCullough's been there, actually. So they got a good leadership group, and they have him out there kind of directing the defense along with a couple other guys. So I think that's really the story. I think they're going to score points. I don't think they'll have any problem scoring points. It's just, is that enough to win games, or are they going to have to really step on defense? And I think they will have to step up on defense.
Don't they have a tradition for being pretty good defense? Because I remember seeing them when they had Hines. People talked about Hines, but they had a lot of dudes that could actually play.
Oh yeah.
And so it's kind of like they've had like traditionally good defensive units.
Oh yeah, they had that same year. Hines was only one of like 3 or 4 D1 like high-end D1 prospects. I know on the defensive line, Deontay Watts was a Nebraska commit. I mean, it's the talent. The cupboard has never been bare talent-wise. I mean, I was shocked last year just with just the turn that defense took over the back half of the season. Obviously highlighted by that performance against McKinney and whatnot. But no, I mean, even for you mentioned Zach Wachuku, Tyler Owens in the secondary.
Right.
He's I mean, he might be the top prospect.
I think
defense.
McCullough basically said that in maybe not quite those exact words, but Tyler Owens is certainly. I mean, I think he has the Mizzou offer. Is that right?
I've seen Kansas State. It seems. I mean, he's going to be a senior. His profile blew up a ton this spring. I mean, you kept seeing just every.
They've got guys. They just have to figure out how to play a scheme maybe that works for them, or just how to. I don't know if it's a pursuit deal or if it was an effort deal. I don't think it was an effort deal talking to McCullough. I mean, that should never be one of his teams.
Not with the way he coaches.
It's ever an effort deal. So hopefully maybe for them their spring focus on it and really keying in on defense will produce some better results this year.
With Plano Senior, the Wildcats were the lone team from Plano ISD to make the playoffs. Made it to the last night of the season, and by a hair. There was a scenario heading into that last week where all 3 Plano schools could have missed the playoffs, which would have been just wow if that had happened. But nevertheless, Plano was able to get back to the postseason. They should be, Plano should be in a pretty solid position to contend for a playoff spot once again. As is the case, it seems like every year with Plano, it's just going to be a question of just how the passing game develops. We all know that Plano can run the ball. They've got one of the top rushing offenses in the area, headlined by Kyron Cumby, Cody Christ. And that's going to once again be their identity. But Jadon McCullough has made it a point. Like, we don't want defenses just to be able to key in on Kyron.
Right.
They don't give him the ball. That's the reason that kid should not touch the ball more than 20 times. I remember seeing him as a sophomore. I'm like, man, who's this guy? He's like, man, he's supposed to be Plano's next big star. And every time you see him, he does star things, but he doesn't get star touches.
And they did ride him much more later in the season once they had to move Cody Christ over to to play some linebacker on defense. Like I said, they're still going to be the focal point of the offense, but like I said, McCullough wants it to where teams just aren't keying in on that. And one of the things that can make that a whole lot easier is just a development at the passing game. I was just going back over the years. Plano's had one 1,000-yard passer over the last 5 seasons.
Wow, that's not
when you factor in you play at least 10 games a season, I mean, that's, so the passing game is definitely definitely left a little bit to be desired. The running game has been there, but one thing that, entering this season, this is going to be the 6th straight year that Plano's going to enter the season with a new starting quarterback. So it's not a position where they've been able to really build a whole lot of just,
They traditionally put I don't know maybe the best, but a good athlete and just kind of roll with it.
They've seemed to, in recent years, you've noticed they, to add another wrinkle to that running game, is the presence of a dual threat quarterback. These last couple of years with Aaron Ragus, Jonathan Taylor, both players that could scoot on the ground. And it's when you add that to what, Cumbie and Chris could do, you had 3 options. You had 3 guys who could break for 100 yards a game, and that happened several times last year. But eventually you're going to have to be able to move the ball through the air, and if nothing else, just to take some pressure off of, just to give the defense some reason to not just crowd the box and just, try to just hone in on that running game. Cole Winnett, who was the backup last season, has, Jadon McCullough was quick to, quick early on into the spring to say that Cole Winnett's, he's, going to be our starter. In years past, that decision's kind of gone a bit further, a bit closer to the wire. But they also like what they have. They're going to get their Winnett's backup, Oliver Towns, some reps. Towns is just going to be he's currently just a sophomore, going to be a junior next season. And I saw over the weekend at 7-on-7, they were kind of splitting reps, 50-50 between them. Winnett would take two series, then Towns would take 2 series. So they like what they have, at both spots. But it'll just be interesting just to see how the passing game evolves for Plano Senior this season as they try to get back to the playoffs. Let's round it out with a look at Plano West, a team that there's no getting around it. Plano West fell on some tough times last season.
Right. What happened to all their talent? Because they were pretty legit 3 years ago as far as
when Soso Jamabo graduates, it's just with him, that was just a kind of a, I don't know, just turning a new page in the Plano West storybook, and it's not a season to remember for the Wolves. They're went 0-10, the first winless season in Plano ISD since 2003. That's not going to be the case this year. I feel like, at least just judging by their non-district schedule, that Plano West has at least put itself in position to, certainly just begin that, that build back up to prominence. Just kind of, what's your read on Plano West, and what is one off-season storyline that's on your radar, Taylor?
Well, the read is obviously just to be competitive again. And when you talk to Scott Smith, that's what he says. The expectations are high internally, but I think externally, expectations can't be any higher than, just find a way to be competitive again. And that's going to start at the quarterback position. Speaking of developing a passing game, they don't have a quarterback right now set in stone. They have 3 young guys, 2 rising juniors, and Danny Davis and Will Cannon, and 1 rising sophomore, and Greg Drawn, that are all kind of, neck and neck for the starting quarterback job. And you mentioned that Plano's already kind of named theirs. That's definitely not the case for West. That I got the feeling, talking to Coach Smith, that it's going to come down to basically the week before they line up for their first scrimmage, if not the week before they line up for their first actual game, non-district game. So Will Cannon and Greg Drawn both saw time in the spring game, and they both looked pretty good. Danny Davis sat out because baseball had such a late season and cut into his time with spring football, but he'll certainly be getting in 7-on-7 and summer workouts and all that kind of stuff. So for them, it's monitoring that competition, and hopefully, I feel like it can go one of 2 ways. Either you find your next 2 or 3 year starter, or you're kind of back at the drawing board and really young and have to try to figure something out, or do a rotation or whatever. So it'll be developing, and I'll be watching it over the summer. And Coach Smith just said he's waiting for one of those guys to really set themselves apart.
Can't win in this district without quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I feel like it can go one of 2 ways. Either one of these guys steps up and becomes the starter and never really lets it go, or they got to figure out some sort of rotation. And Smith did say that he was pleased with the competition and the way it was going, because they're very competitive, and it's a real battle, and they're watching obviously all 3 of them, but he said they're very tight knit as well. Nobody really has an ego or cares about splitting time, so maybe that's the direction they go, if nobody really sets themselves apart.
Let's focus on just the one of the newcomers to this district, a team like Prosper, which
big offensive line.
Yeah. It's, I guess, one of the most compelling storylines in this district is just what do we make of Prosper? It's one thing to say with, we all know what to expect out of PISD, Allen, McKinney ISD. These teams are all familiar with each other. Even a lot of them have seen Jesuit in years past. But Prosper is outside of McKinney is kind of an anomaly to the rest of the district.
I think it's going to be a big adjustment here, because somebody selling them in 14-5A, they were always the big boy on the block. now they're just another face. And it seems like when they go against people that are other faces on their level, they tend to struggle because they don't have the team speed. They have the size. Right. That speed is what really has been lacking with them, especially when they get beat in the playoffs.
With this Prosper team, they ruled District 14 5A, back-to-back district titles.
Taylor Adams was the man.
They were the end-all be-all, but they did lose. I was just trying to think of, like, for comparison's sake, like, I mentioned this a ways back, like how teams like McKinney and Wiley did in their last years in 5A before making that transition to 6A. And, I think we could say that Wiley and McKinney certainly held their own over the course of the 2 years in 6A. Yeah. They never appeared just woefully overmatched or anything like that. And Prosper's, I guess, coming from a better spot than those two programs were at the time. Prosper coming off back-to-back district titles and being one of the better teams in the Metroplex at the 5A level. But they do lose a ton of seniors from last year's team. I was going through, they lost 16 kids that made the all-district list.
It's a bad year for that team.
Including Caleb Adams, who was a very underrated guy. He's like 5'7", but he'd bust 180 and 3 touchdowns on you.
Oh yeah, they lost district MVP Caleb Adams. They lost defensive MVP Justin Benzie. They lost defensive lineman of the year Jevin Jackson. Offensive utility player of the year DJ Love. 14 5A gave out a ton of superlatives on their all-district list. But at the very least, so it'll just be, like you mentioned, it's not an ideal spot you like to have, because I think McKinney at least had a bit more continuity working in their favor, because that was
they were a team on the rise.
Even though they were coming off, I think, just like a 3-win season at the time, it was still the kind of the midpoint of that senior class as they just lost. They were about to enter their respective junior years.
Exactly, and it was kind of crazy because I was at the game. McKinney ended up losing to Wiley, but that was the winner take a winner going, and that's how Wiley got in the playoffs. But for them to be the newcomers, they basically fight each other head to head to get that first year to get in the playoffs, and Wiley got in.
We did mention they're just needing stability at quarterback, and they do return their starting quarterback Keegan Shoemaker. But elsewhere, they've got a lot of very, very key players to fill, and certainly not the district that's going to afford you much of a learning curve in order to adjust to that climate. Let's round it out with a quick look at Allen, the district champion, the Class 5A, the district 6A champion, and that was all they did last year. Now Allen won its 4th state title in 6 years. They're the reigning Class 6A Division I state champs, and it's a new offseason. There's always going to be that Rubik's Cube's always going to look a little bit different every offseason with the pieces that you have to fill. Obviously, if you followed Allen last year, if you saw him, you knew how just important that running game was to them, and it's that's kind of been the what exactly we're going to make of this Allen offense now that they lost a ton of that running game. So of players on Allen last year who weren't quarterbacks, so running backs, receivers, anybody who fielded a carry out of the backfield that wasn't a quarterback, Allen totaled 3,102 yards. All right, of those 3,102.
I thought that's from the people that did that, wasn't it? I'm like,
that was remember they had a 2,100-yard rusher at the top of that.
Right.
So of those 3,100 yards, they graduated 3,015 of those yards. So that's 97.2%.
Hey, but when you got 6,000 people, you find somebody.
There's probably
I'm confident they'll find somebody.
They right now the projected starter is actually a transfer from the Episcopal School of Dallas, Andrew Henry, who's a 3-star prospect. He's got some low-level D1 offers.
What is it going to be like? The receiver is going to be a running back.
He's starting running back right now. Starting running back right now.
Sturgis is going to be hard to deal with. People realize Sturgis and Gaddick were. I want to say they were top 5 in the state for all-around rushing yards.
Oh yeah, Sturgis ran for over 2,100 yards. You could argue pound for pound that was the best season an Allen running back has ever had. Brock Sturgis in 2017. So it would be foolhardy to expect a guy like Andrew Henry or whatever, or any committee just to fill in a 2,100-yard rusher and not miss a beat. It's very much akin to like what McKinney's going through right now with Matt Gaddick. So it's a question of now, like, how will Henry fit into their system, but what kind of trickle-down effect is there with respects to like Grant Tisdale at quarterback and Theo Weiss at receiver? How much are their roles going to evolve without Allen? With Allen likely to be probably not as reliant on the run game like there were last season.
Do you think for Theo to be as highly rated as people always like, why didn't we use him like this? Like, how they used him more in the playoffs. It's like people, was that just because they were up by so much they didn't want to show?
One of the things that contributed to it is they lost their number 2 receiver, Carter Schlecker.
Gotcha.
And you could tell the dynamism of Allen's passing game kind of tailed off because you just didn't have their. Carson Schlecker is he's an Iowa State commit. A high level D1 prospect. Theo Weiss, top wide receiver in the state, maybe the country. Yeah. So you had and the Allen offense became a bit more reliant on just Theo Weiss just being an incredible receiver, just winning every jump ball in sight.
Do you think people are going to go like, okay, we're going to make Tisdale beat us with his arm, not his legs? You think that might be the MO?
Well, that's the thing. Like without Brock Sturgis back there, Grant Tisdale's a guy who last year he averaged only just a shade over 12 pass attempts per game. That number is going to go up this season, most likely.
It has to.
It has to, yeah, for Allen to get. So, yeah, I mean, it's too early to tell. We'll see what happens. But, yes, a lot of what the, Allen's offense is always among the best in the state. And for it to get back to that level, a lot's going to be asked on Grant Tisdale to take that next step forward.
With all these question marks, do they not win district next year?
I mean, again, they should. Not going to say anything's a certainty, but, again, they should.
Well, it's like even when you talk to, other coaches around the district, won't name names, but just, I mean, it's almost like every year it's Allen and then who's fighting for the other three, like who's fighting to come up behind Allen. It's just it's pointless to ignore that, and it's pointless to kind of feel like that's not the case, because until proven otherwise, Allen is just kind of the de facto.
When you've won district 12 years in a row, I believe it is. Yeah.
It's going to take some serious surprises for anything to happen to that, and I don't see this as being the year that happens.
Yep. So but that's a quick look at District 9-6A. Obviously, there's still a long ways to go until we get to August. We'll be sure to preview this district in far greater detail once fall practices get rolling. Today's Student Athlete Spotlight is brought to you by Bavarian Grill, authentic Bavarian food and beer garden. Listed by the Zagat survey as the highest rated German restaurant in Texas for 12 years in a row. 12 years. That's 3 presidential terms. You can enjoy traditional and authentic spring favorites now, everything from appetizers like slow roasted ham hock and potato pancakes to entrees like bratwurst or breaded schnitzel. Bring your whole family for lunch and dinner. They are open Tuesday through Saturday, located off Parker and Highway 75 in Plano. Bavarian Grill. And now, let's get back to the podcast. In the meantime, Kendrick has tagged in Devin Hassan. Devin is going to round out the podcast with us as we take a look at District 11-6A as we continue our spring football primer series. District 11-6A, a district that has the same number and just about the same number of teams as last season, the same configuration, -1. Still got Mesquite ISD, Mesquite High, Mesquite Horn, North Mesquite, the Rockwall ISD duo of Rockwall High and Rockwall Heath, as well as Longview and Tyler Lee. It's the same 7 teams that have been in that district for the last couple years. John Tyler was in that district, but they have since dropped down to Class 5A. Devin, so let's, I guess, what is your read for kind of the just an overall look at this district, given how it's the same exact configuration just about as last season?
Well, I mean, last year it came down to 6 teams were still alive to make the playoff going into the last week of the season. Yeah. You lose one of those contenders in John Tyler, who, which I don't think anybody's complaining about. John Tyler has state championship aspirations in Class 5, and they return a lot of talent. Yeah. But I see it being, a similar story. I mean, Mesquite and North Mesquite were those 2 teams on the bottom last season. I think they're making strides, but I still think there's a gap there. We'll see what happens in the fall as far as how much they've done in the offseason. But, Horn is your reigning district champion. Last year was a little bit of a surprise. Not that they won the district title, but that they went 7-0. They had a lot of close games, mind you, but they were able to win and go undefeated. I just don't think anybody really expected even the district champion to go undefeated. I think it's a similar story this season. I think there's going to be a lot of parity in that top 5, and it's going to be a battle down to the wire.
I still remember because when they opened up against Longview in district play last year, right? And that was kind of the initial pick by a lot of prognosticators that it was going to be Longview's district, and then we were just all to a man just shocked at how Horn just kind of handled them.
Well, and it was one of those nights where everything just went Horn's way. I can't remember how many times Longview turned it over, but following on Twitter, because I was not actually at that game, it seemed like every 5 minutes Longview was turning it over, and every time they would turn it over, Horn would immediately cash into the points. And it was just one of those, Longview has won the district championship, or coming into last year, 12 out of 13 years. And so they've been dominant in this district, and you just didn't expect them to get beat that soundly. But Horn that was, Jermaine Givens, his first year as a starter, that was kind of his coming out party. He had some great games in non-district, but when he was able to really do what he did against a good Longview defense, that was kind of announced his arrival onto the scene. And obviously he went on to win district MVP honors, kind of for nearly 4,000 yards. True dual threat. I mean, threw for over 2,600 yards and 29 touchdowns, rushed for 1,286 yards and 20 touchdowns. And when you look at the touchdown numbers, Horn played 12 games last season. 49 touchdowns. So just a shade over 4 touchdowns a game is what he was responsible for.
I mean, when you have that kind of a luxury then back this season, I mean, I got to imagine that expectations are pretty sky high for Horn right now.
They are, and there's holes to fill. I mean, Isaias Taylor is back in the backfield. He rushed for over 800 yards last season. He's a nice compliment. They did graduate most of their receiving core, and they're going to be very young in the offensive line. So they do have some question marks there. Now, one thing Horn has been able to do over the years is just find those budding stars at wide receiver. I mean, it doesn't matter the year. They seem to graduate their top 2 or 3 every year, and then they just find guys to fill that hole. But, certainly having Givens back there gives them a huge leg up, a huge advantage, and it's going to help those younger receivers because he's been working all spring with them.
You mentioned Mesquite and North Mesquite as being 2 programs that missed the playoffs last year, but are on the come up. With Mesquite, they were breaking in a new head coach last year, Jeff Fleener. What are kind of expectations right now for Mesquite as they enter? I guess their first. I guess when was Fleener hired last year? I think if this is their first full offseason under him, or where he came along last season.
It is well. Spring. It was somewhat of a difficult transition period because he only had 4 weeks.
Okay, so
once he got hired, plus he didn't have his staff filled out till after spring ball was done.
Okay.
He had made hires, but some of them had other commitments that they weren't able to get away from. So he didn't. This is their first full offseason.
So there's going to be a much greater sense of normalcy to this offseason.
Well, and he stressed, and he didn't mince words. I mean, they were in the weight room the Monday after Thanksgiving, and he didn't mince words. He said, we simply were not strong enough to compete last year. They were not physical enough, so they spent the last few months in the weight room building up that strength. And he said, just now, we're now strong enough to compete. Now the next step is to be stronger than our opponent. But he said, last season we just were not strong enough to compete. And obviously they took their lumps. They went 1-9. They're still breaking in some new players. They're going to have a new quarterback. Arturo Flores is likely going to be the starter. They do have a kid named Dylan McGill who moved in last year that's going to be a junior. He's going to get some snaps back there. He's kind of one of those game breakers that they can make plays with his legs as well as with his arm. But, they have some pieces. Devin Davis is a 6'4" receiver on the outside. Cantrell Ray Jackson was their leading rusher last year. Ladarius Turner is a newcomer that should contribute in the backfield. They're going to have a different look. They're going to kind of slow things down this year. Last year they were up tempo, just like so many teams they have this year. This year, he said, we're going to use Casey Freeman is a tight end. They're going to use more tight end sets, kind of, turn to the ground game a little bit more. So it'll be interesting to see with a year under Coach Fleener, as well as kind of a change in philosophy on offense. See if they can take a step forward and maybe get into that playoff contention race.
Whereas Mesquite was going through this transition phase last season, it's kind of the spot that now North Mesquite finds itself in this offseason in the wake of longtime head coach Mike Robinson heading to DeSoto. I guess kind of what the vibe around the Stallions right now as they begin a new chapter in their history books, and just kind of what's been one key offseason storyline you've been focusing on with them?
It's really very similar to what Mesquite was going through a year ago because Tim Cedar, who came over, he was a defensive coordinator at Horn. He came over, and it was really the same time frame. He only had a few weeks to get things settled in before the start of spring ball. Taking over a team that has a lot of questions. I mean, they graduated their top 2 receivers, graduated their quarterback. They do have a nice running back in Juwan Clark coming back. Only a couple of defensive starters are back. So it's going to be a complete overhaul. So not only are they going to have to endure the normal transition phase that comes with having a new coach and a new staff, they're also filling in a lot of holes with younger players. Yeah. So it's going to be tough. It's kind of learning on the fly. Pleased with the spring effort, but it's really gonna be tough to see what how much progress they were able to make until fall.
Yeah, and especially in a district like that even though you don't cover these teams directly, is kind of the expectations that the Rockwalls and the Longviews are just going to be just as potent as they've always been. Yeah,
Longview again, they haven't missed the playoffs since 2000. Again, they didn't win district last year, which was kind of an anomaly for them. That dropped their percentage down 12 of the last 14. Now they'll have to settle for that. So they're going to be, in contention. Haynes King, the son of head coach John King, was the offensive newcomer of the year last year at the quarterback position. And Rockwall's another one. Rockwall's had one of the most fun, explosive offenses in recent years. They returned their quarterback, Jacob Clark, who threw for 2,900 yards, 29 touchdowns last year, and new running back, but Jackson Smith is also back at wide receiver. And I said this early on.
Oh, yeah, I remember talking to him.
Jackson Smith was a sophomore last season, and he was one of the more impressive players I saw throughout the season.
Okay.
Just really impressive. Tyler Lee has had a coaching carousel out there for a few years. I think someone would take the job, and then he would He stepped down before the season even started, and it was just, like 4 coaches in 3 years, something crazy like that. But they seem to have some stability with Kurt Traylor, who's got, really good pedigree from his time as an assistant at Gilmer, which has been a powerhouse for years. And then Rockwell Heath obviously was, they kind of fly under the radar sometimes, but they made the playoffs last year. A lot of people don't remember that, but so it's, it's going to be competitive. It's going to be a lot of fun. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it's probably going to go down to the last week of the season.
Expect nothing less from 11-6A after what they've shown us these last couple of years.
Yes, that's when we get, that we spend the last 2 weeks poring over these, secondary and tertiary tiebreaker rules and whatnot, digging deep into the manual.
So that's a cursory look at District 11-6A. Once again, folks, we will continue. Actually, we will round out our spring football primer series on Thursday with a look at 2 more districts out in Class 5A. In the meantime, folks, this has been Matt Welch with Star Local Media. Devin, appreciate you for tagging along. Taylor, you as well. Folks, hey, we'll be back to talk with y'all on Thursday. In the meantime, you guys enjoy the week. We'll talk to y'all later.
Thanks again for checking out this edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast, brought to you by Yale Butcher Shop, a meat market and burger joint based in Plano. It's summertime, folks. The temperatures are going to start heating up, and what a better way to break into that summer heat than to break out the grill, do some barbecuing. Well, guess what? Yale Butcher Shop has you covered. They can help you with everything from catering, grilling, barbecuing, or any special occasion, serving the finest cuts of meat from everyday to exotics. They are located at 811 East 15th Street in Plano, open Tuesday through Saturday. A smoking good time since 1974, Yale Butcher Shop.